But I want to welcome you all to this panel, Change is Here, on Youth Leading Action in the U.S. I'm Haley. I'm the moderator tonight. I'm with the U.S. Action for Climate Empowerment Coalition. And I want to say that this panel is held with two themes at the center. So the first is that we are currently at the center of climate action in the world. Everyone's here. Our government has sent tons of delegates to work on climate around the world. And it's not happening fast enough. It has never happened fast enough. And youth, the people on this panel, are here leading action in the US by themselves with incredibly creative and urgent groups and chants and marches and activities and policies, because we know how urgent it is that we address this issue. So even if governments are not leading fast enough, the youth will be here and we will be leading the way. The second thing is that we're here in the spirit of Action for Climate Empowerment, whose work program was just passed by the negotiators last night. So in that spirit, we are dedicated to the interdisciplinary and equitable work to advance climate action across all of society, because everyone needs to be involved in order to build a more just and sustainable future. So with that, I would like our panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Will.
Hi everyone, I'm Will Sharuis. I'm from Miami, Florida, and a 10th grade student at Ransom Everglades, and I'm the founder of We Are Forces of Nature.
Hi everyone, my name is Aryaana Khan. I currently reside in New York City, but I was born and raised in Bangladesh, and I'm a very anxious college senior at the City College of New York, and I'm representing the Action for the Climate Emergency here.
Hello everyone, my name is Kevin J. Patel, he, him pronouns. I am a 21-year-old climate justice activist from Los Angeles, California, representing One Up Action International, and yeah, excited to be here with my fellow panelists.
Awesome. I also realized I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Haley Krim, I'm 24 years old, and I'm with the US ACE Coalition. So my first question I would like to ask you all is, as building off what Aryaana just said, what is the successful way that you have dealt with eco-anxiety? That's something on the minds of youth everywhere around the world. We're seeing it here a lot. So if you have any tips or tricks, or just sharing that you experience it as well, anyone can take the first shot at that.
Okay, so when I first started getting into the climate issue, I was really environmentally anxious. And then a mentor of mine, Dr. Jane Goodall, sort of taught me to be hopeful, and that led me to be less anxious, because I saw the true hope in that if everyone worked together, then if all the youth and everyone around the world worked together to solve this issue, we could be hopeful, and it just helped me.
Awesome. Do you want to go next, Aryaana?
Yeah, before I talk about how I've dealt with it, I want to talk about why I have climate anxiety. So I was born and raised in Bangladesh, and I spent half of my life there. I can only say that until next week. I turned 21 and I'm 20 now. And I grew up in Bangladesh for 10 years, but whenever I go back to visit my family in the villages, so much of what I grew up with doesn't exist anymore. And I hear stories from my parents about them swinging from a mango tree to a coconut tree, and that was their childhood, and how that is not at all the present or the past that I had. And I'm anxious now that it's definitely not going to be the future at the rate that we're going with things. But the way that I deal with it is that I come from generations of farmers, and I have very strong roots to the land, so I try to garden, and I'm trying to inherit my mom's green thumb. I don't know if I'm successful because I've killed a lot of plants, but I'm also trying to establish roots in a place where I'm not necessarily from. I'm now on the other side of the world, and a lot of that is because of climate change. My family had to leave our home because of that. So I'm trying to be hopeful and grow roots, to kind of like our opening chant here in this land. Because at the end of the day, no matter what part of the world we're from, this planet is still ours, and we can make it work here.
Yeah, I guess we all see the headlines, right? Droughts, wildfires, hurricanes, and all these other natural disasters, and we can all get lost in those headlines. And I guess for me, what gives me hope or what gives me optimism is seeing the young people who are taking action, who are advocating, who are going on the streets, who are making the policies to make a difference. That's what gives me optimism and really the hope to keep an optimistic viewpoint of like, we do have a future, given that all these young people, including I, are fighting for climate action, for climate justice. So, yeah.
Great. And our Zoom panelist, Maryama, do you want to take a stab at this question?
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So my name is Maryama Warsame. I am 18. I'm a senior at Rosemont High School in Minnesota. I am representing the Youth Environmental Activists Network at Climate Generation A Will Seeger Legacy. So for me, I can kind of agree with all the other panelists. Like, the headlines is what I see and what makes me very anxious about my future when it comes to climate justice. So I think the best way I kind of dealt with that was joining a group, right? Joining an advocacy group, because I knew I wasn't alone. Like, I knew there was a group of people out there that I could talk to in the same position I was in, and was like, hey, we could do this together. We could fight together. And at least being able to build that community is what really helped me. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that's been shared, and finding solace in other people and in groups and collective action, as well as non-human beings and plants and animals around the world, I think, is definitely, it's the spirit of this panel, and it's the way that we will be able to get through this, is by working together. So with that in mind, why does intersectionality and respect for all different types of people and beings, does that need to be embedded in decision making, and how if you have any ideas for how that could be done, or requests of our senators who are here today? Yeah, you want to go for it?
Yeah, I can take this one off. So before, the way that things have been before, and the reason why they are the way they are in the present, is because we've exploited certain lands and certain groups of people and certain beings a lot, more than we should have. I don't think we had an understanding of the connectivity that we share as a planet before. And now we're experiencing the backlash of that from nature, from the rising inequalities, and so unless we focus on intersectional solutions, things are going to continue in the same way. So if we are trying to build a different future, if we're trying to build a radically more inclusive world, one where everyone has clean air, has good food, and has community, we have to have intersectional solutions and an intersectional lens to move forward differently.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Intersectional environmentalism gives us a holistic understanding of what social justice means. It connects the dots for us. It connects all social issues. So rather than focusing on women's rights or environmentalism or civil rights, we get to focus on all of them. And what does that look like, right? What does intersectional look like in policy? Really making sure that we are connecting these issues to really solve the social injustices that are happening to communities. So health justice, gender justice, immigrant justice, what else? There's so many other injustices that we have to focus on. And intersectional environmentalism, for me, it's like we get to see how these issues are intersectional. And if we don't have intersectional solutions, we will never be able to solve the climate crisis. So we must connect the dots in order to solve the climate crisis. And if we're not connecting the dots, I guess it's up to the youth then, right?
I also want to add that it's definitely important for the youth to have a say in this issue, because it's going to be our world that we're living in where these environmental problems and global warming are in their worst form. And if the youth don't have a say, it wouldn't be fair, since it's going to be our world that we're living in.
Yeah, and Maryama, if you have anything to add, we'd love to make space for you.
Okay, yeah, I really liked how everyone put that intersectionality in perspective, with like looking at it in a holistic lens. When I think of intersectional like environmentalism, I see inclusivity and how climate change affects us disproportionately is the main thing for me, and how the people who emit the least carbon emissions are the ones who are affected the most, and why is that, and how can we help them? I see it with Line 3 as well, and that fight, and how is this pipeline affecting us, and not just affecting our environment, but how is it affecting the people living on this environment? What is it doing other than just emitting carbon emissions? And looking at it in more of in a civil rights perspective as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Before we move on, I just want to say the person who coined intersection environmentalist is actually here, Leah Thomas. So she's sitting here. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, huge. Is this working? Okay. Huge shout out to Leah Thomas for leading the way on that. And with all of this wisdom in this room and on this panel, I want to talk about barriers. So what barriers have you faced in your climate journeys? And also, this is a two-part question. What does the future that you're trying to build look like when you can get past them?
A main barrier I've faced is that since I'm a youth, and youth aren't normally allowed at the decision-making table, it's very difficult to get into contact with higher officials. In a way, I've been able to get past this issue is by being persistent and by making sure to talk to not only people of higher officials, but people who have connections, to be able to eventually talk to those people who I have in mind. And then in the future, for me, a perfect world would be a world with no carbon emissions, in a green planet with trillions of trees and organisms. And to do this, I think we have to give the youth a say in this issue.
I just want to say that the biggest barriers young people face the biggest barriers. We face a financial barrier. We face not being included, ageism. We face, BIPOC, especially Black, Indigenous people of color and marginalized communities, are not only not given the voice, but not given a seat at the table. So when we're talking about the most affected people in the planet not being given a seat at the table, how are we going to solve the climate crisis if those who are being affected are not at these spaces or these conferences, given they are going to be able to come up with the solutions, given that they're being affected. So again, young people face such a multitude of barriers and adversities. But what I do see in the role of young people and what our future looks like, or what I hope it looks like, is that, world leaders and politicians don't don't think of us as the leaders of tomorrow. They think of us as the leaders of today, the solutionists of today, the change makers of today, the activists of today. We're literally coming up with the solutions that will solve the climate crisis. Actually, we already know the solutions to solve the climate crisis. A lot of the young people are coming up with innovative, and bold solutions. It's about our leaders taking the solutions that we're coming up with and implementing them within policy, within local and federal, and as well as just global context. So I think young people need to be heard, and they need to be given the financial resources to really implement the bold solutions that will solve the climate crisis.
Absolutely. Maryama, do you want to take this one?
Yup. I could not agree more. And I would also like to highlight another barrier is that climate education is not provided in our schools. And I think the biggest thing with that is that a lot of young people who would be affected the most are not, and I guess affected the worst as as climate change progresses and gets worse. We're not being taught this information. We're not learning about it. So why would we be inclined to make a change and fight for a change if we don't even know that there's something that has to be changed in the first place? And I think we have a lot of barriers, with our age, our race, our identity, and we also have barriers with our education system as well, and that is something else that we need to work on.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm gonna run through really quickly a couple of barriers that I personally face. So because I grew up in Bangladesh and New York, I don't feel like I fit in any one place, and I'm so glad we talked about intersectional environmentalism before this, because it's not something that has been super persistent in mainstream movement spaces until indigenous folks, until young folks started highlighting it more and more over the years. And I'm currently a biologist in the making, so the denial of the science still happening is extremely frustrating for me. And lastly, I'm glad you talked about ageism also, Kevin, because there's always going to be a tension for change between older generations and newer generations. But the future that I see is where young people right now are fighting not only for ourselves and our future, but for generations after us as well. And that tension that we're dealing with when it comes to older generations, I hope that it would lessen as we become more conscious, and as the younger generations after us are hopefully even more conscious than us.
Yeah, absolutely. We're building something great here, I think, with all of our different perspectives and backgrounds and ways we get involved in this fight. And with that, I want to thank this panel. Do you have any final words you want to say? Any final closing statements?
Keep showing up.
Yes.
I guess I would say for our next panelists, they're coming on. They're amazing, other amazing speakers, amazing young people. Keep in mind that our solutions, our conversations must be intersectional to solve this crisis. We will never get anywhere. We will never solve this issue if our conversations, if our education, if our solutions and our actions are not intersectional. So please, please keep in mind, look up what intersectionality is and make those connections. With that being said, I'll go ahead and pass it back.
Absolutely, and we need to be pushing for those kind of intersectional solutions in policy, in our actions, in our schools, in our spaces that we work, and everywhere to be able to build that kind of better future that we're working for. So thank you so much, and I'll ask our next panel to come up and take a seat. And Maryama, feel free to jump in on any of these questions as well. Is it back? Okay. Awesome. All right, so welcome to our next panelists. I just want to give you a quick second to introduce yourself, starting with Julieta.
Hello, everybody, and good afternoon on this Friday evening. I'm so honored to be joining you all from Scotland and as part of this great panel. My name is Julieta. I am 27 years old. I was born in Argentina, and I currently live in Miami. I am representing the youth in Miami as part of my role as program manager at an organization called the CLEO Institute, which specializes in climate education and advocacy. And I'm also really honored to be here as part of a delegation. I was invited to be part of the team with Climate Generation, a Will Steger legacy. They also do climate education, and they're based in Minnesota. So it's really an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. Gina, you want to introduce?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Yeah, my name is Gina Fiorile. I am 25 years old, and I wear a couple of hats. I work for the Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network, the CLEAN Network, and they are based out of Colorado, University of Colorado Boulder. They're a great coalition of climate educators and teachers and people, activists who are interested in all things climate. So I'm the program and communication coordinator for that network, and I am also here representing the delegation from the Wild Center, which is a natural history museum in upstate New York in the US, and we have an amazing Youth Climate Summit program that I was involved in that I will also talk about more later.
Hi guys, my name is Aisha Siddiqa. I am the co-founder of Polluters Out, and my organization wants to and is trying to remove all of the fossil fuel industries that are sponsoring this huge conference. I am also an organizer. I've organized strikes and climate protests in New York City, here in Glasgow yesterday. So it's wonderful to be here.
So happy to have you all here. So for the first question, I would like to talk about the power of youth. We talked about barriers right before this. So what do youth bring to the table in decision making, and why is the youth voice critical at all levels of policy making and decision making?
Thank you. I guess I'll start. Youth brings so much, and we know that. So I'm here to just highlight a couple of things because I work a lot with students, particularly high school students and university students throughout the state of Florida. And they are some of the most determined, passionate, honest, and authentic people that I have ever met. I want to point out something about high school and university students in particular that I think is really cool. I have never met people with more skills at time management than these students have. I don't know how many of you engage with them on a regular basis, but they are juggling so much. They have sports, they have academics, they have extracurriculars. Our students were just applying to college. They have prom, they have homecoming, they have so many things going on. And so when you talk about what do they bring to the table, they bring all of their skills in time management, in having authentic and raw conversations, in being able to negotiate with diverse peoples, because young people are growing up in the most diverse generation in history, especially those in the United States. And they bring so many skills that are really necessary in this new workplace, as well as this new challenge of just how do we confront climate activism. So that's really what I think they bring, just a lot of skills, especially in time management. And then lastly is just research. So again, I don't know how many of you talk with high school and college students, but if you give them a research project, they will go all out and they will really dive deep if they're passionate about it. And we know that high school and college students are really passionate about it. So just let them use their talents and give them a platform to do so.
Awesome.
Yeah, I can go ahead. So I just want to reiterate everything Julieta said. It is so true, and a lot of things that were said on the last panel are also so true in terms of intersectionality. Youth are usually the first group of people to speak up about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which, as Kevin said, climate change will not be solved without intersectionality. So young people are really important to involve in the conversation because they always have that on their mind and they're more aware of it than other groups of people. I would also say that along those same lines, young people have this lens that they look through that is different from other generations. They don't usually see the same barriers and problems that some older generations have created. They don't really follow the same rules often. They don't usually understand why things have to work a certain way, and really question that that business as usual system that we work with constantly. So youth really bring a new lens to everything that they do. They have more energy, they usually have more optimism, and they have no problem asking why for certain things. So it's really important to invest in young people for those reasons, and they just bring endless new ideas and new perspectives that have never existed before. So they just have a really diverse perspective that is really invaluable to the climate fight.
Speaking of bringing a diverse perspective, I'm going to answer this a bit differently, if that's okay.
Definitely.
I have some friends in the audience here, Alexandria, Kevin, Leah, and COP has existed for longer than most of us have been alive. Now, if COP was a homework project, we would have all gotten an F. If COP was an essay, we would have gotten an F. I think, actually, even beyond that, we would have failed out of whatever school we were in if this was an assignment. So, not only has this institution existed longer than we've been alive, I think the urgency of the climate crisis is not just about bringing new ideas. I mean, this is our reality. Most of us are here at the Conference of the Parties not because we're passionate about climate change. I've heard that so many times. I think that's a horrific way to describe those of us fighting for our survival. We're here because some of us don't have air to breathe. Others have fires so close to home that when they look outside of their window, all they see is smoke. Myself, I've lost family. I live in a community where every time it rains, I'm scared my house is going to go underwater. So, and the other thing I wanted to actually add to this is, it is not just about the youth. My friend Xie, she's 19. I have gotten so much wisdom from her. But yesterday she said a quote that I wanted to share. It's an African proverb. It says, "The youth run and the elders lay out the path." In my opinion, climate work, especially among Black and brown communities and indigenous communities, has been going on for generations. Being guardians of the planet is something that people do out of responsibility to the earth. Those of us who come from cultures where we protect the earth, this is not just a movement that was formed 5 years ago or 10 years ago. This has been our way of life since we've known what life is. I know that youth is a wonderful pitch for media. I know that exploiting the idea of future and innocence is something that people have been doing again and again. But this is my last day here at the Conference of the Parties, and I want us to critically think why it took white kids with blonde hair and blue eyes for the global north to get activated for the climate crisis when the rest of the world, especially children, have been suffering for decades now. And I want us to evaluate our definition of innocence and right to a future. Why do we believe that certain groups, certain children have a right to a future while others don't? Do we even consider those people humans? Do we consider their childhood a right? Over here, there are multiple, actually, Alexandra's in the room. I'm sorry, I'm calling you out, but there's a lawsuit that she's been doing, which has been about the rights of children. Childhood in the Western concept was actually created after the Industrial Revolution to sell more products. Before that, children worked. So this pitch for a childhood is actually only for the comfort of certain groups of people in the global north. And I think that the conversation has to move beyond future and innocence and childhood, and has to move with who do we consider human, and why don't we jump up to preserve their livelihood as quickly as we've done in these past 5 years when it was a certain kind of child asking us to invest in their future, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is kind of the central question that youth are asking at this COP is, why did it take so long? Why are only certain faces and people listened to? And why do we have to be here calling you out? Are we not worth the action and proactive action that it would take to solve this for the benefit of everyone? Yeah, I really appreciate what you just said. Maryama, I know do you have anything to add to that? I can't really see you on the screen, but if you have anything, go for it.
Yeah, I would definitely like to add on to the conversation. I really love what I think Aisha had said, and I really want to echo that. Like, this is more an event for like world leaders. Why am I like here? Why do I have to be here? Why do I feel that I have to be passionate? Why do I feel like it's my responsibility? Why am I worrying about my future? That shouldn't be my responsibility. That shouldn't be my problem. I should not fear that. I should not have anxiety over that. And I think it's not something like, I really liked how she said it. It's not something that we should be celebrating and like saying, oh, wow, youth are like, for example, Greta Thunberg, like, why did she feel like the need to speak up? Why did we have to even walk out of our schools to support her and her idea, and echoing her? Because finally we have someone that we can see like, hey, I believe that. Why don't we do that? Why don't we listen to her? Why do we have to listen to her? Because you should already know that. You are world leaders. And especially with like climate change and climate justice, and that aspect, it's not something it's not something you believe in, and it's not something that you should make a decision on whenever. It's a fact. It's not an opinion. We should have done something before, and children shouldn't have to care more about their future because the adults refuse to listen, and the adults aren't doing anything about it. I think now that I've turned 18, I started thinking more about why did I care so much as a child, watching a lot of like teenagers like me live blissfully with ignorance, because they know it's not something that they're passionate about, because they know they shouldn't have to be passionate about this. They know they shouldn't have to fight for something that should be given, right? And something that should be obvious. And it is really sad to see that a lot of us don't really recognize that. And I really love the way that you had brought that up and like started that conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. So with youth in this extremely uncomfortable position of having to literally fight for our survival while challenging all of the norms and the structure and the policies, the ways things have been done, it can be really tough. And I asked the previous panel about anxiety, but I want to kind of flip it around. And what is something that gives you hope or excites you or is an opportunity that you see either in your personal work or for the youth movement as a whole that you are seeing right now?
I can go first. So first of all, I just want to acknowledge what you said and say that it really moved me, and I think you were able to so beautifully articulate so many things that I feel and just have not been able to form the words. So yeah, this is not something that, climate change is not a burden that youth should even have to deal with. And it's frustrating. You know, I really resonated with the, I've always said, I'm really passionate about climate change. I'm really passionate about climate change. And honestly, it is exhausting saying that because it's true. It's not something that I should have to be passionate about. So I just want to acknowledge that. And on, I don't know, a different side of things, as Haley said, kind of point to a bright spot. And now I'm going to talk about a program that I've been involved in that inspires me and gives me hope. And that is the Youth Climate Summit program at the Wild Center, which is the Natural History Museum that I mentioned in upstate New York. This program is a totally youth-led, youth-driven program that convenes young people. It's a model that is flexible and works for any location. So it really aims to serve the audience and actively involve the audience that it is serving. So it convenes young people to talk about climate change, to learn about it. Maryama said earlier that one of the big barriers to climate change is that young people don't have a proper education about it. And this is kind of a way around that. While they're not learning about it in schools as much as they should, this gives them a really fundamental understanding of climate change and does not leave them with this sense of hopelessness in that education. It empowers them to take action. So the end result is a climate action plan that students can take back to their schools and communities. These climate action plans are really integral to helping youth feel less isolated and help them with some of that really emotional, heavy turmoil that goes on inside of you when you learn about climate change. So I was involved in that program in high school and have kind of been a part of it through my young adult life and hope to continue to be because it's something that's very special and close to my heart. So I would just say that's a bright shining spot that I look to. And again, it's not something that youth should have to do, but it is something that they are doing regardless, and kind of taking that responsibility when adults are not.
Yeah, so I'd like to speak about climate anxiety because I don't think that's a term that you can paintbrush over everybody in the climate movement. There's climate anxiety, and then there's climate PTSD. And those of us who have witnessed the destruction a hurricane can do, the destruction pollution can do, the dead bodies that can pile up, we have climate-related post-traumatic stress disorder. Every time I get a warning that there's another hurricane coming to New York, my family, we lock our doors, we make sure that our basement is completely sealed, so if water starts seeping up in, it won't go up into our furniture. I've, again, seen the word climate anxiety used in a lot of media, and it's often attributed to people thinking about what will happen in 50 years from now, 30 years from now. And then you flip the lens, and let's like micro into place like Sudan. People aren't experiencing climate anxiety. They don't have water. They don't have food due to drought. That is beyond just PTSD. That's survival, and that's a fight in of itself. As hope goes, a lot of my work in the climate movement, it's dual. I'm here motivated by pain, and that's a truth that I've had to learn how to articulate. I can feel the pain of the earth inside me. I know those of us who are involved in the climate movement can hear it, can see it. It aches inside of us. There's also pain revolved around constructions that capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, the climate crisis have done, but also simultaneously so much love for the planet and the people. Because if we did not have this love, revolution for us would be a completely different thing. Resilience would be a completely different thing. It is love that made hundreds of us walk in the street today in the cold and the rain. It was love that got us again in the cold and the rain yesterday. It is love that we are here sharing our stories with you, asking you as in world leaders to bet on a tomorrow. And also the love for the little things, because those are also at risk when we talk about extinction, human extinction. Every memory we've created, every cup of coffee you had, every moment you've had with your children or your friends, like that is at risk. So I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Yeah, it gets to the tension. I personally don't like it when people ask about hope, because it's a double-edged sword. It's the two sides of being motivated by terror and love. And it's neither of those really gets at hope or in the traditional sense. But yeah, more of, I don't know, opportunity, or just an overwhelming feeling that we have to be doing something. It's not passion, as you said, a couple of people have said before. It's the just need to do it from an instinctual level. And I think that completely got at that, what you just said. Yeah, does anybody else have thoughts about that?
Thank you. So in the United States, particularly in Florida, and in my hometown of Miami, students are not learning climate change education in schools. It's not appearing enough on the school curricula, and they are getting sustainability education like recycling and water conservation, but not so much about climate and justice and what's ahead and what they can do about it. In tandem with a lack of climate education, we also have a lack of civics education. What is our role? What are our rights as students, as children, as minors, as people who aren't eligible to vote for all kinds of reasons? At CLEO, we've been working with students and teachers since 2010, since CLEO was founded. But in 2019, we did something really cool that I'm really proud of. We met an amazing student. Her name was Nicole, and she inspired us to do something really unique in South Florida, which was to create a peer-to-peer learning program. And she came to us with this idea because she said, we're not learning climate in schools. She's part of our Gen CLEO youth advocacy group, which is unrelated to the school system, but she said, I want to bring more climate education to my peers. Can you help me make this idea happen? We worked with her and we designed a program that encompassed all of the other programs that existed. And so now students are saying, we're not learning climate in school, so we're going to teach each other. And that's what's happening now. And we have thousands of students that have received climate presentations and climate trainings on science, on impacts and solutions. And that all came to light in part because of a student who was able to reach out to an organization and say, I need your help. Can you bring this to life alongside me? That program is officially called CLIP. It's a Climate Leadership Information Program. And after students become certified climate speakers through our training so that they build their confidence, they have different activities throughout the year where they have climate conversations with their loved ones, because we know that's a climate solution too. they have peer-to-peer presentations with their other classmates, because we know that's a solution too. And so what gives me hope is the capacity of students to reach out and say, I need help. And what also gives me hope is nonprofit organizations saying, I'm here to help. You know, nonprofits have different access that students might not be able to, like grants and funding. And so being able to create that intergenerational dialogue between nonprofits, which are mostly led by older people, not particularly students, saying, let's do this together and let's put our skills together and put our talents together to really make an impact.
Thank you so much. And Maryama, if you have an answer to that or thought about that, or a just closing thing you want to send us off with.
I want to add on to what Julieta said, because we have something working on here at Climate Generation with the youth, and just a little like a two-part thing. So last year we had drafted a climate justice education bill with some help, and it really focused on why we needed climate justice education and the opportunity to share that and to have that at our schools. Unfortunately, it did not receive a hearing, so we're still working on it this year in hopes that it will receive a hearing in the next session. And during that time, we had drafted a curriculum for students that could be shared with teachers, right? So it didn't really matter what subject. Even with like math and like music, we found ways to be able to share the same message and inspire others with a climate justice curriculum that was more holistic, and that wasn't just like, here, write a research paper, or here, just read this and annotate, but like, let's start a conversation. Let's have this conversation at our schools so we can get more people knowledgeable, more people willing to act, knowing that they are empowered and have this power within themselves and within their community. And that's what we really wanted to focus on. And I'm so glad that we're able to start getting more partners and people invested and sharing our messages within our schools.
Great, thank you so much for that incredible bright spot, as well as the rest of you. Do any of you have a quick closing sentence or thought that you want to share? And then we'll take some questions.
Something I learned today that I wanted to share with you. So on the topic of students, when I was in high school, which was about 10 years ago, during civics and government class, we learned about the Revolutionary War. Have any of you learned about that and the phrase called no taxation without representation? I see some heads. Okay, I learned that too. But this morning, I learned the updated version of that. I was at a panel, a press conference, more accurately, held by Youngo, which is the youth constituency to the UNFCCC. And there was this amazing student. Her name is Haley Campbell, and she represents the ACE working group. And she said something really cool that I wanted to share with you. And she said, nothing about us without us. So can we say it together? Nothing about us without us. And that's the modern day equivalent to no taxation without representation. It's unfair to make policies that affect youth without having youth involvement. So if anyone says, we have this great youth program, but youth were not a part of it, just say like, nothing about us without us. Thank you all.
I'll just say, I don't have any thoughts to tie what I've set up with the pretty bow or anything, but I'm inspired by the other people here. at the end of the day, I feel really exhausted and overwhelmed, and I just want to be transparent and let other people know that is a very real thing that I think everyone is feeling, and you're not alone in that. I've been doing this work for many, many years at this point, and I'm only 25, and it's exhausting. I'm burnt out, and it's really hard. So I just want anybody who's out there that's feeling that way too to know that you're not alone in that, and to reach out for support and to look at the people around you and just know that you have it within you and the other people around you have it within them to just keep going.
I mentioned earlier that today is my last day at the Conference of the Parties, and I have a request for you all while I'm gone. This conference is being sponsored by fossil fuel companies. It has been being sponsored. I don't know, that's not grammatically correct. It has been sponsored by fossil fuel companies for the past 26 years. If you believe that we are in the climate crisis, you also believe that the fact of the matter is 70% of the carbon emissions are caused by 100 oil companies. They should not be allowed to be funding, making line edits, and changing the Paris Climate Agreement. And they are. Whilst we sit here in this panel, there are negotiations occurring, and we don't even know about them. I'm an observer, and I have not observed a single negotiation. And I am frustrated about this. So, Polluters Out, the group I'm working with, in addition to multiple youth, we are demanding a conflict of interest policy with the United Nations, the 90 nations that make up the UN, and the fossil fuel industries, not to just remove them in terms of figuratively, but remove the real violent damage that is being done when you don't have the word fossil fuel in the Paris Climate Agreement. When you are removing indigenous people's rights and autonomy to their land. A lot of this is just hodgepodge. It's just for show. I don't know what has happened in the past 6 days. I have nothing to say that is like tangible that I can bring home. Aisha, what did you do at the Conference of the Parties? I don't know. I protested. Or what's occurring? I really don't know. Biden said we're removing methane by 30% while people are hunger striking in front of the White House on the verge of death. So my request for you all here is to demand a conflict of interest policy. It is not a pipe dream. It has worked in the past. The World Health Organization was able to remove big tobacco from its conferences, not only figuratively, but through legislation, and that changed the culture around tobacco. It is no longer the big, powerful industry that it was in the past. There are warning signs on every cigarette packet. They are taxed. And we're talking about fossil fuels, the thing that is causing us to die collectively, we, the global majority, we, the people. And at every conference you attend, with every politician you talk to, wherever you go, I am asking you to request and demand that as well, because we need it. We have less than 6 years before we reach 1.5 degrees of warming. That means 140 million people will die. That is 140 million dead bodies. 140 million lives are at stake. And you in these rooms have the ability to save lives. What will you tell your children in 10 years when those bodies start piling up? What will you tell your children in 20 years when they show up at your shores? You have the opportunity now. Do something. We need it. It is necessary before it is too late.
Thank you so much for that incredibly powerful call to action. Before we turn it over to questions, where can we find information about that? How can we get involved?
Polluters Out, simple Polluters Out, our website. We have a petition.
Polluters Out, check it all out. Support your local youth in climate, particularly Black youth, Indigenous youth, and youth of color. And with that, we have time for 1 or 2 quick questions if anybody has one. If not, we can just end here and hang out a little bit. We also have a couple of the organizations that people are representing have stickers and pins and stuff over there if you want. It's probably not good to be having merch at a climate conference, but it is available. And I want to say thank you so much for coming and listening. Thank you so much to our panelists for their wisdom and everything that they've shared. And I hope that you all take something away from this for the rest of COP and for the rest of your lives and your time in the climate movement. So thank you so much.